5, 2, 3, 2, 2.5, 1. Go.
Okay. Good evening, everyone on the Environment Subcommittee. Hopefully this will be one of the later meeting times that we have, though I suspect we may very well have later meetings before crossover, but hopefully not too much more. But anyway, thank you for joining the subcommittee. Margie sent out the agenda earlier today. Let's start with House Bill 255, Maryland Paint Stewardship, Delegate Boyce. So, Kristen, could you remind us all where this bill stands?
Sure. This is the bill that it's establishing a paint stewardship program that is planned by producers of paint, and it's funded by through a paint stewardship assessment that's set by the producers. The bill is essentially the same as last year's. I think there's one little technical difference that came over from the Senate, but this is a bill that essentially this committee passed last year.
Okay, and it's a bill that we've passed for a few years, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Does anyone want to make a motion on this bill?
I move favorable, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay, any discussion about this bill again?
Well, it's a tax on the homeowners and the contractors, and they'll go to Delaware in my area and get it without this. So,
okay, all right. Any other comments or questions? All right, all those in favor of the bill, no amendments, correct, Kristen? Is that right?
No amendments, correct.
Okay, all those in favor of the bill, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
no,
Okay. Did I hear 2 noes? Delegate Otto, Delegate Morgan?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, bill passes. Okay, that's the only bill that we're going to vote on tonight. The others we will just discuss to the extent that we have time. So why don't we start at the top with House Bill 11, Delegate Stewart, the Private Well Safety Act of 2023, which we did pass in pretty much this same form last year. Is that right, Kristen?
Yes, that's correct. Correct. I don't know if you heard me.
Okay, yes. All right. I'm
All right.
sorry. So, and
he did change that a lot, Dan, but I'm still going to vote against it. I can't, for my county.
okay. Yeah, we're just in part because it has a fiscal note, a not insignificant fiscal note. We won't be voting on it, just discussion. So,
But isn't this essentially money to the counties? It's not, I mean, never mind.
You mean the fiscal
okay.
impact or the?
No, I guess I was addressing Delegate Otto's concern about impact on his county.
But he changed it a lot from his initial legislation before. I think it's mainly a testing program, offering a test once a year or twice a year or every 2 years or something.
Right, and I thought there was that was like money, like there was something given to the homeowners to be able to test.
okay. Actually, let's raise your hand if you want to have a comment. So I'll go with Delegate Foley first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is on the, hold on one second. I'll ask my question, and I should have closed my door and I didn't. But thank you, Brian. On the fiscal note asterisk. So when that says exceeds the fiscal limit, what does that mean for us?
Typically, at this point, $100,000.
Okay, but what does that mean for us in terms of are we not supposed to pass bills that, why is that noted for us?
Yeah, you mean, why is there that that limit or?
Yeah, why is there an asterisk that says, hey, note, this exceeds the fiscal limit? What does that mean? What are we supposed to do
Mr.
with
Chair,
that
do you want
information?
me to answer that
Sure.
or?
Yeah,
Sure.
if you
So,
don't mind.
because I did make that note on the agenda to highlight any bill that the subcommittee chooses to, that votes to move the bill. If the subcommittee moves to vote the bill favorably, the next step is that we have to check in with appropriations to ensure that they are comfortable with this committee passing a bill that has a fiscal impact that exceeds that limit.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you.
Yeah. So the fact that we're just discussing it, not entertaining a motion on it tonight doesn't mean that we might not approve it, sometime soon, but just for now, just discussing it. Okay, Delegate Morgan.
Does this become an unfunded mandate by definition?
Kristen, how would you?
No, I don't think so. So the requirement here is, so there's different components to the bill. So the first part is it's establishing a program and a fund to help cover costs associated with water quality testing and remediation. And so that's subject to the availability of funding, which there is no funding source in the bill for that part of the program. So the counties don't have to give grants. It's just, this is a program. If it was funded, this is the mechanism by which they could go through to get some assistance with those costs. And then there's another piece of the bill where the department must utilize an online portal to receive results of water quality testing from state labs. And I feel like then a county must submit to the department records of certificates of potability as required under regulation. So that's the requirement. I think that it impacts the county is the piece of uploading those certificates to the newly created data portal.
The grant program, does that have to be funded by the county? Or would that be funded by the state?
No, it would. I mean, I think the idea is there would be some sort of funding source provided, not from the local governments. It would be if the fund was funded, and it would be an opportunity rather for the county to request, funding so that they can then just provide funding to their residents to assist with costs. But there's no requirement that a county has to fund this program.
Then the last question then is the funding then going to be predicated upon income?
There are provisions that guide on how the department can award grants, and grants may be awarded for up to 100% of costs associated with water quality testing and remediation to a household that can demonstrate household income below 50% of the state's median income level.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Delegate Guyton, did you have your hand up?
I did, but my questions have been asked. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think we're all hungry, so I'll hold on to that.
Okay. All right. Very good. And I guess the sponsors amendments, Kristen, look to be fairly technical. Is that right?
Yes, the sponsors amendments add language to ensure that any grant application fees that were collected by the department would be deposited into the private well safety fund. And so the department had raised several concerns with the bill, and that this addresses one of those concerns.
Okay. Any other questions about this bill before we move to House Bill 147 for discussion? Okay, thank you. Kristen, could you explain what House Bill 147 would do?
This bill is requiring each county to prepare a climate crisis plan, and they must submit it to MDE by June 1st, 2024. The bill establishes minimum required contents and requires counties to post its final plan online. We did receive amendments from the sponsor that would expand that list of the minimum contents in the plan. One was to require that the plans address reducing emissions associated with food consumption and ag production in the county. And it would also require the plan to address ensuring accessibility to healthy and affordable food in vulnerable communities impacted by climate change. And then the other amendment would require the plan to address encouraging the use of organics and recycling and separation of food waste in public facilities.
Okay, and in terms of fiscal impacts, Chris, I'm just looking at the fiscal note, the impact of the state, relatively modest, $70,000 in year one, but the impact on local governments is projected to be significant, and the bill would impose a mandate on local governments.
Correct.
Delegate Foley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the agenda, you indicated that there was another amendment from the AFL-CIO. What was that amendment? I didn't see that one.
Yeah, those were in the in our floor system. Let me bring that up.
I didn't go to the floor system, so I didn't see it.
No problem. I actually forgot I noted that. And I'll bring it up on the screen. So it'd be another consideration in the plan, and I'm going to bring up the language. So it would be another requirement to look at the impacts on the preservation or creation of new jobs during the development of the plan.
Right. Okay. And the sponsor is okay with this amendment?
No, those are just noted for
Okay.
any member to, if it makes them, kind of pique their interest, want to take a look at it, see what this amendment is. And
Okay.
it has not been offered by any member.
Okay.
And I don't know one way or the other. I'm not even sure if
Yeah.
Delegate Stewart has taken a look at it. I see.
Isn't it Delegate Fraser Hidalgo?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm jumping from you're correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He mentioned in his testimony that he was amenable to it. That's why I was interested in looking at it. But it looks like it hasn't been drafted. So,
Correct.
yeah. But he did say, I asked him the question and he did say
Okay.
something about, speaking to them about this. So I assumed that he was going to include the amendment, but I don't know. I might have made a wrong assumption. And we all know what happens when you assume anyway. So,
Yeah, I think we've
All right.
received 2 sets of amendments from him at this time.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe this is a mandate on the local governments to have to hire a $100,000 consultant to draw up a plan that suits the MDE and whatever. So I'm going to vote against it.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Otto. Delegate Terraza.
Yeah, a couple things. First, will you guys send us the other amendments, or do we need to go to the floor system? I just want to make sure I have everything in front of me before we.
All of the amendments that
Okay.
I've received were sent out today.
Okay,
There was the initial email, and then I sent out one more amendment.
so I have 2 amendments from the sponsor,
Correct.
but the thing that you were just showing us from the AFL-CIO, is there?
That's
we-
that's in the floor system. So usually what we just send out is the language that either we received new language from someone that we didn't hear from during the bill hearing, because theoretically you can
Oh.
access it. You can access this in your floor system.
Oh, so just
Testament.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No
No,
problem.
just to clarify, you mean it's in their testimony?
This is a part of their testimony. Yes.
Oh,
So-
okay,
And,
okay.
and so,
That
it was
makes sense.
actually, I thought I was being helpful, but maybe it's easier if I explain it. So I was going through my chart, trying to see like how to show the most information as possible in an agenda. And so, and those amendments, it's just because sometimes we're going to have sponsor amendments. And so
Yeah,
we'll hand those out, we'll talk about them, but it's possible somebody might be interested in something that was offered in testimony. And so when I
Okay.
make that note, it's going to be because it was in testimony, unless somebody sent me language after the hearing, and then maybe we would
That's
send it
helpful.
out in the materials. I mean, you know, I don't mean to be confusing with what's being handed out.
Yep, let me be clear. I think this chart's very helpful. I think that clarification was very helpful. I don't think personally you need to change that. I just need clarification.
No
Now I
problem.
understand. I think it's,
Okay.
I think this is a great chart. But back to the cost of this, I guess, I'm just thinking about sort of the climate crisis issues that come up in a county. And don't they end up costing the state a tremendous amount of money if there's not good planning for it? And I'm not blaming Howard County for not planning for the Ellicott City floods, for example, but in fact, you know, we did a lot to plan for them, but perhaps more needed to be done. And certainly going forward, now that we know those types of things happen. So it seems to me that this is, in the end, should be money saving. And Howard County, I'm sure, has a climate crisis plan at this point, but everybody should have one so that we don't get surprised with big bills that the state and county and the taxpayer essentially have to pay later. So that's just my 2 cents.
Sure. No, and I think probably the sponsor made that a similar point in his presentation. I mean, there was another, I think Mako said their sort of counter on that was they'd rather spend the money on implementation than planning. I mean, that's just in terms of the points of view on that.
But just, can I respond?
Sure.
I mean, that's great, but you can spend an awful lot of money on implementation and be going in the wrong direction if you don't have a plan. So I don't know, just maybe my 12 years in county government that makes me think about that, but thanks.
No, fair enough. Delegate Morgan.
So Dr. Oslo, on the other side, if 12 years in government, we don't have enough people now to staff the positions we're advertising for. So this means we'd have to go find maybe somebody to staff a position that we don't even have enough people in the department to staff to begin with. So that's sort of the yang and the yang from my side.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions? All right. Thank you. Let's move on now to House Bill 253, Delegate Shetty, on-farm composting facilities. Kristen, could you sort of broadly describe what this bill does and then talk about any amendments that we've gotten?
Yeah, and the amendments came through today, so I kind of just was only able to briefly look at them during the hearing. And what the bill is doing, it's establishing, requiring the Department of the Environment to establish by regulation for on-farm composting facilities. This would be an exemption from the permitting requirements for on-farm composting facilities that use 40,000 square feet of area or less for active food scrap composting, composts only one or more of a specified list of feedstocks, records the amount and source of feedstocks composted, records the date and the time the feedstock arrives on the farm, and retains the records for 3 years, and meets any other conditions specified in regulation. We did receive amendments. I could bring up that reprint, and that way it'd be helpful for me to go over it that way anyway. Oh my gosh. I have to apologize. I'm so slow at bringing this up, but I'm looking for the reprint. If everybody has it in front of them, instead of me taking time looking for it, I'm just going to go over it. I need to find a quicker way to access this stuff, but after a day of all my windows open, I'm afraid I'm not very quick. So
why don't you go through it? Sure.
Yeah, I'll go through it. So the first amendment would alter the definition of the offsite type 2 feedstocks that would exclude industrial animal processing residuals.
And Kristen, is that a fancy way of saying animal carcasses?
Well, I think that's dealing with the processing, I guess, material that's left over. I don't know for sure because the first exclusion, the definition is animal mortalities. And this is in addition to this. So I'm thinking about when it's industrial animal processing, something that's in that processing of an animal. But I
That's
can only
left
speak
over.
to the words. I don't really know.
Okay,
When
that's fine.
you clean the plant up and the fat and all is in the water and it can smell at times.
Okay. All right. So something separate then.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Why don't you go ahead, Kristen?
Um,
Why don't we let Kristen go through?
yeah. So then,
And then we'll take questions.
Hey, it was,
so there's language added to, so the Department of the Environment currently has authority in governing the permitting and operation of composting facilities. And so new language is being added that the regulations adopted by the department could also require that a new composting facility is constructed and operated in accordance with a nutrient management plan if required, and a soil conservation and water quality plan or an agricultural waste management system plan. And then there's, I think, clarifying amendments on the final page that the language for the exemption was regarding using 40,000 square feet of area or less for active food scrap composting. That would be changed to in support of food scrap composting rather than for active food scrap composting. So I think that's the amendments that we have so far.
Okay. All right. Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see Colby Ferguson is on the thing. Colby, is the Farm Bureau comfortable with these amendments?
Way that they, I think they take care of the, I think you guys were talking about DAF. Chicken DAF is what's been taken out. We don't, I thought it was already kind of outlined when it says no liquid products, off-site liquid products, but they wanted to be specific with that. So we're good with the bill.
We're comfortable with that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You good, Delgado?
Yep.
Okay. Delgatraza.
So to clarify, this is just what we're looking at, and I'm sorry to keep asking this. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. These are just the sponsor amendments. Is that right?
Right. That's
okay.
what we have received those amendments from the sponsor today. This
Excellent.
afternoon.
Okay, excellent. And then the related question, and this goes to what you were saying, Delegate, Mr. Chairman, about animal carcasses, because I have in my notes that you asked about animal carcasses and the answer was there were no animal carcasses. So is that still true?
Yes, I believe so. Is that right, Kristen?
Are you asking that they would not be allowed to be composted?
Yeah, okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Delegate Ruth.
thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to see if Emily Ranson had any comments about the amendments, where we stand on the bill with the amendments.
Yeah, thank you. So these amendments have been negotiated with the Farm Bureau with extensive environmental input as well, and we are very comfortable and happy with them and appreciate the sponsor putting them in.
Great. Okay. Any other questions or discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Delgado.
you say no animal carcasses. Would that impact the composting that we do with the poultry flock mortality? I mean, we do that now. We've been doing it for years.
I think this is for the qualifying for the permit exemption.
Okay. Well, that qualifies under the nutrient management permit and such. But anyway.
Mr. Chair, I think Colby may have had an answer on that.
Thank you. Colby.
Yes, sir. That doesn't, this only applies to the off-site food scraps that are brought in. So you can't bring in dead carcasses from another town or something like that. It doesn't mess up the on-farm piece. So if you have a composting site already for mortalities on the farm, that doesn't change this. It just doesn't allow you to bring dead carcasses from other places in.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before we move on to House Bill 299? Okay.
Do you need to move the amendments?
No, we're not we're not
All right.
moving the bill or the amendments
All right.
today. So, all right, House Bill 299. Delegate Lehman, synthetic turf, chain of custody, another bill that we have had before and approved before.
It is, it did come in a different posture from past years.
Right. Okay. Could you remind us what the bill does and the response or amendments?
So the bill requires MDE to establish a system to track the chain of custody of synthetic turf. So beginning January 1st, 2024, a custodian of synthetic turf, sports or playing field installed in the state must report certain information to the department. And then MDE would serve as the repository for that information and develop and maintain a publicly accessible website that includes a chain of custody information and the names and contact information of each custodian that provided the information. And we received amendments that would add language under the reporting requirements that reply when the turf has been removed. It would require that the weight of the turf be reported to the extent practicable. So if they didn't have that information, they wouldn't have to report it. It also clarifies that any other information required catch-all provision would be for information that's reasonably related to the chain of custody of the synthetic turf. The amendment also adds language specifying that a custodian may not be penalized for variation in the reported weight totals. And it also alters the penalty provision. It makes it an administrative penalty rather than a civil penalty.
Kristen, in terms of what that practically means, it means that the department could issue a penalty on its own without having to use the court for any process.
That's my understanding of, and certainly I think Department of Environment is in here, but it's my understanding that it just allows the department to enforce without having to go through the court system.
Okay. All right, Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it's the will of the committee not to move on this bill tonight, but I'd certainly be willing to do that if others are ready.
Yeah, sorry, we're not quite ready yet, but thank you. Perhaps in the future. Delegate Ruth.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was actually going to say that I think the sponsor wants to hold it a week anyway. I think she has a concern. Kristen, she talked to you about that, right? That she's trying to.
So the Delegate Lehman did reach out to me. We had a conversation, during hearings. And so it might need a little more time to flesh it out, but it's basically regarding the application. She was concerned that this would capture fields that are currently installed, but might not capture those fields that are installed in the future. So I told her I'd take a look at it and see if we could come up with some clarifying language to ensure, those fields that are, presently installed versus the ones that, are installed after that reporting date.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. Delegate Guyton, is there a new question? No, you're good. Okay. Delegate Terraza.
So on this, to the extent practicable, the weight of the synthetic turf, can you explain that again? I know you said something about it, Kristen.
So that comes from the testimony from Mako and Park and Recs. And I think it's because it's not always available. I think it might get installed and then the person may not have that information. But I can look up, to remind myself, I'm going to need to look at the testimony.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the idea is to know how much they have theoretically. I guess if you have the area, you're okay. I was just wondering why not say the weight, and if not, that's to the extent practical. If that's not practicable, then you give the approximate weight. And then the custodian may not be penalized for the minor variation in reported weight totals. I mean, sorry, I wrote minor on my notes for variations in the reported weight totals, but that was the sponsor amendment? Or is that from?
So I'm not sure if I froze or what, but I think I missed some of that. These
okay.
amendments the amendments that I did just describe are from the sponsor, but they were based on the MACO concerns.
Okay, I see. And I mean, I guess I just wonder, and I'll talk to the sponsor, but like I understand that if there's some variation in the reported weight totals, but it seems like if there are minor variations, and then if you say I've got 10 pounds worth of turf and you've got 1 million pounds worth of turf, it seems like, why would we exempt that? Just my thoughts on that, but I can talk with the sponsor about it as well.
Okay, well, Delga, if you do want to follow up with the sponsor. And I guess in just as we talk about it, I guess I do have a question. So is the thought there that if a prior custodian reported a particular weight for the turf, and then a subsequent custodian had a more accurate total, which turned out to be, let's say, a lot more, then is the idea behind this amendment that the prior custodian wouldn't be penalized? Is that, for something that turned out to be maybe inaccurate?
I think that'd be the effect of the amendment.
Okay.
I'd have to go look back at the testimony on intent.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And Delga Terrassa, if you want to clarify with the sponsor too. And
Yeah, I'll talk to her. Yeah.
great. Okay. All right. Any other questions about House Bill 299? Okay. Well, and we're at 6:35, which is probably our witching hour. So we will wrap up, and thank you for approving. We approved House Bill 255, no amendments, discussed all the others. And, again, just without making any commitments about any of these bills, just because we didn't consider motions on any of them, any of the others, doesn't mean that we won't in the future. So let me just say that, but not at this point. So, okay. See you all
Alrighty.
same time. Well, same date next week, hopefully a little bit earlier, but after bill hearings next Wednesday. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
I see you at dinner.